This is a fan-generated show. If you'd like to support us, please go to jrnyquist.blog. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our new Rumble channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, leaked audio exposing China's war plans to invade the United States. With us this evening, Jeff Nyquist, an expert in geopolitics and the history of communism. He is author of many books, including his latest, The Fool and His Enemy. Jeff, what an honor to have you back on the Glazov Gang.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you, Jeff. This is not a topic I think that is going to bring a lot of joy and happiness, but you have the latest information from a released, smuggled out 56-minute audio from a military/civilian mobilization meeting in China in Guangdong, if I'm pronouncing it properly. Very disturbing stuff. Tell us about this.
Yeah, the meeting took place on May 14th. It was recorded surreptitiously by people that were present. There's been about 40 people arrested. Since that happened, I believe 2 generals of different rank of generals have been executed, along with some other people for the release. Mr. Wang of Luda Media and his organization got it out. Mr. Wang is a former People's Liberation Army communications officer, technician who worked in the People's Liberation Army headquarters. He's in the United States now. Dr. Yi Meng Yan briefed me, was the initial person who briefed me on what was in it. And I got to read more than one English translation of it and speak to Chinese people who'd looked at it. What the meeting basically covers.
Jeff, sorry, 1 second. Now, the military people who have been executed, it's because the buck stops with them and they're punished that this happened under their watch, so to speak, or they may have been complicit in the smuggling out of this audio.
Or the recording of it. See, someone in the room had to have recorded it.
I see. Okay, go ahead.
So you have this meeting. What you have at this meeting is you have the head of the military, the Guangdong military district, the governor of Guangdong, and their staffs are meeting in order to go through an order given by the Communist Party Central Committee sometime in May. And the order is to go from normal to war for Guangdong province. All the things that are required to do that. And so they discuss it, and there is a political commissar present who is sort of overseeing or helping them to manage the meeting. And so they're going over the various points of what they need to do. And for example, there are going to be 953 merchant ships that are going to be prepared to be able to be loaded with troops to be used for an invasion. They're going to convert 64 10,000-ton ro-ro ships to carry. Ro-ro ships are roll-on, roll-off ships that are like you go to Japan and you pick up a bunch of Toyotas, and then you come to Long Beach and you unload all the Toyotas, right? But you can move tanks and armored personnel carriers on that instead of cars. So they were ordered to retrofit these roll-on, roll-off ships to carry tanks, APCs, self-propelled artillery. They also talked about 588 trains that would help bring the armor and the vehicles to where the ro-ro ships were after they were retrofitted. They talked about retrofitting the ro-ro ships. You know, they had a timeline in May. They wanted the ro-ro ships retrofitted sometime in late June. And the guy that was responsible for outfitting them said, I can't do it by this date. There's 190 companies that can help us do this, but we don't have access to the best port facilities. And those are some of the things that are in it. There's also a discussion about the 4 nuclear power plants in the Pearl River Delta, how they're vulnerable to maybe commandos coming in off of American submarines to retaliate against strikes made against America, and how they're going to position their militia and their People's Armed Police to protect the population or protect those nuclear power plants and other targets, infrastructure targets, or to use the People's Armed Police to guard against an uprising by the people in the cities in the Pearl River Delta. In fact, that was the hottest contested part of the argument. They started to argue about how to deploy the People's Armed Police, and they seemed to defer to the governor, and he didn't want to make a decision. He said to the head of the military district, he said, "It's your decision, Commander, not mine." So it's a fascinating meeting, and it's a frightening meeting, because here's why it's frightening. This is one province in China, obviously a very rich one. By the way, it is not the largest coastal province with the largest naval assets. And it's not directly opposite Taiwan, by the way, Fujian province, which is in the west. They're in southern military. They call it Theater Command, Southern Theater Command. Eastern Theater Command has as many or more ships and naval forces to ready. And so we're not even seeing that. So if they're mobilizing 1,000, converting 1,000 civilian ships, they've got to be doing the same thing on other parts of the Chinese coast.
Let me interrupt for a second, Jeff. One step at a time. This all seems like some kind of surreal science fiction, but this is real life. And I just want to start, let's just start with this here for a second. Right. You would think that these people are crazy because the retaliation, but knowing Biden and what's going on in America, that's another question now. It's not Ronald Reagan or Donald Trump. It's Biden, so we'll discuss that. But Mao Zedong enjoyed killing 80 million Chinese people. Mass murder, and in his speeches, in his writings, it's all been documented. Killing millions of his own people was a good thing. This is the way that communists purge the earth of its sins and its infections, and they create a new planet. And this is what they do. Why I'm saying that is a lot of through my study and watching brilliant people like yourself and others learning about all this, because some people would think, why would they dare to do this? Because of the retaliation, there might even be a nuclear bomb dropped on them. They don't care. The Chinese have already taken into account, yeah, well, a couple 100,000 might die here, a couple million might die here. They don't see human life, even of their own people, as important the way we would do in the Judeo-Christian tradition, right?
Right. That's right. That's reflected in their discussion of civil defense.
Mm-hmm.
They know if these cities, these mega cities get hit, they're going to lose a lot of people.
And that's not important to them.
Well, what's important to them is following the, I forget how many orders they had. What was it? 30 something tasks that they had to complete. And they had a list of all kinds of things in different categories they had to do. And they just talked about the basics, and everybody thought they could do it. They had an argument about how they were going to use the People's Armed Police, like I said, and the guy that was responsible for converting the Ro-Ro ship said, "I don't have the resources. You need to give me better resources to do this in time." Now, I had an interview with Mr. Wang of Luda Media, because there's a lot more information that they have from their sources in China that goes along with this to explain it. The thing that struck me when I was first briefed on this was the numbers of the ships. You know, your average merchant ship is between 10 and 21,000 tons in terms of what they can carry. And these Ro-Ro ships, I mean, 10,000 ton Ro-Ro ships can carry more tanks than Hitler invaded Russia with in 1941. This is astronomical numbers. These ships have huge tonnage. And so I was really curious. So because I had these questions, they were very happy. Mr. Wang, with the translator, I had a long conversation with him. And you know, I followed the Chinese a long time, and I believed that they would not launch an amphibious invasion on Taiwan, because Taiwan has such huge reserves, you know, over 1 million reservists. It's a very heavily armed island. The terrain on the island is not entirely suitable, especially to a super large force. And my thinking was they would blockade it. It's much easier to take a large island like this with a large population by cutting off its food supply and bombing it and doing whatever. And the Chinese certainly have that capability. Invading it is, look, China has never conducted an opposed landing in its history that I know of. Well, not since Kublai Khan, right? When Kublai Khan went to invade Japan, they just don't have the history and the skill. We had to work our way up. The Allies had to start by invading Sicily, when they invaded North Africa, then Sicily, then they landed at Salerno, and then they landed in Normandy. This would be like going straight to Operation Olympic in terms of the size of it, the size of the defending force. So when I was going over them with the numbers of ships and so on, I said, well, if they're blockading Taiwan, what is being invaded? And Mr. Wang said the first and second island chains and beyond. And he mentioned the Solomon Islands, where there's been the Chinese have been active, their agents have been active trying to secure that area. And of course, he mentioned Russian troops hiding in the Far East, and that the Russians are entirely on board with what China is going to do, and they're going to support them. And that there's he had a Chinese expert in Chinese military terms explain some of the military terms used in the transcript of the 56, 57-minute meeting, that they were referring to using DF-41, that is Chinese strategic ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads to attack the United States and the US Navy, and that this was in there. And so I said, well, what is the plan here? What do you know about this? And what Mr. Wang said, this is how he clarified. He said, okay, they're getting ready. They're mobilizing to getting ready to do this blockade of Taiwan. And now the latest information that it just came down in the last few days from Mr. Wang's sources is their D-Day is August 1st for putting the blockade on Taiwan. And he said they could push it back, but right now they're shooting for August 1st to blockade it. And he said what they want to do is they want to be in a negotiation situation with the US. So when they put the blockade on Taiwan, they're getting constant feedback from us, from the Biden administration, to know. It's sort of like taking our temperature. What are the Americans going to do? Are they going to come together with the Japanese and try to relieve the blockade? Because Japan wants immediate relief of Taiwan in that event. Japan has said Taiwan is a vital national interest. The defense of Taiwan is a vital national interest of Japan. And you saw that Shinzo Abe here just recently got assassinated. And he was the most supportive of Taiwan, the most anti-CCP politician in Japan. And you see the Chinese ships are sailing around Japan right now, threatening Japan. The Russians and Chinese sailed bombers right into Japanese airspace and South Korean airspace in the last couple of weeks. This kind of harassment, this kind of threat is going on. And what Mr. Wang told me was, he said, look, they're going to put all this pressure on Japan. They're going to try to create an incident with Japan. They're going to use Japan as a warmongering imperialist country that has not reformed since World War II. And then they're going to put the pressure on the Americans, and they're going to say, you mustn't defend Taiwan. You mustn't defend Japan or South Korea. If you want to avoid a nuclear war, you need to split the Pacific with us. We get this half, you get that half, and then there won't be any war.
Jeff, why would the Chinese be doing that when we've got a president like Biden in America? I mean, they must just be terrified of him.
Yeah, no, I think, there are two forms of weakness. One is not having enough weapons, and the other is the moral and intellectual weakness that you show, which Mr. Biden obviously has deficits in that area.
Yeah, so let me just narrow in on that for a second. There's so much to talk about here, but it just sounds so unbelievable and surreal. And I have to keep reminding myself, we're not with, Trump is not leading us. We don't have somebody like Reagan, and also what the American military used to be. But now we've got Biden. I don't think I need to say much more. We've got all that leftist propaganda that's been going on in the U.S. military. We've got what the vaccine mandates did to the U.S. military. And we've got a very large part of Americans that are just watching twerking on Instagram or on these reels. We're in bad shape, aren't we?
Yeah, we're in bad shape. Look, our nuclear arsenal, we haven't built a new nuclear weapon in 30 years. We haven't even tested a nuclear weapon in 30 years. We just had a missile test here in California of an ICBM, and I think, what, a minute or two after launch, it blew up. So it was an unsuccessful ICBM test. We have problems with our strategic deterrent, and I think that, look, people say that we have provoked Russia and we're provoking China by not, they'll probably say we provoked China by supporting Taiwan. This is what China is saying, that our training of the Taiwanese military or are sending weapons to them as a provocation, and that we have violated the basic agreement of our relationship with China. We agreed to a one China policy where we did not recognize Taiwan, but only mainland China. And that by helping Taiwan to defend itself, we are basically betraying that relationship, and so it's our fault. This has already been an argument they framed for this, and they're going to say, look, it's your fault, you. But the real provocation here, the real reason this is happening, is that we're weak. Both Biden is weak, and we're militarily weak right now. And China and Russia are together. On February 4th, Putin went to Beijing. They made a joint statement, and according to Mr. Wang, they signed a military alliance agreement, a secret military alliance. And in their joint statement, if you go back and read it, they say China and Russia is the most powerful combination, even more powerful than anything during the Cold War. This was the language they used. And I think what it is that by these two countries coming together, when they have both rearmed, they've modernized their nuclear forces, they've been building up their navies. The Russian army has a lot of deficits, but look, they have between 10 and 20,000 tactical nuclear weapons. They could easily change the situation in Ukraine. They are ready to do some serious negotiating, and America and NATO and the West had better basically just appease them, or else. We'd better give them Taiwan. We'd better give them Ukraine. We'd better give them Japan. And what Mr. Wang says, they don't want just Taiwan. They want Japan and South Korea. And the reason they want it is the chips, the configured chips, the high tech that even China doesn't produce, that our real sophisticated supply chains are dependent on. Because if we give up Japan and South Korea, we will collapse. And that's what they're really aiming for. And if we don't, they're going to use that missile advantage, surprise attack advantage, and the advantage that we have a weak president and a divided society, and they're going to push some kind of an offensive. Maybe they're feeling their way. Mr. Wang is not entirely certain how the attack will actually happen, except this preparation is to invade the first island chain and the second island chain. People can look up that on a map. They can see what those are and beyond. And he talked about an invasion of Alaska that the Russians would do, and the Chinese would participate in something like that. So,
Jeff, sorry to interrupt. I don't live in Los Angeles. I'm actually somewhere else, but I might drop into LA from time to time. Are people who live in LA or California or on the West Coast maybe need to start rethinking where they live? Are they in danger?
I did that 2 years ago when the pandemic broke out. I know their strategy. I know that landing on the West Coast has been an idea of the Chinese. The secret speech of Chiao Chen is a good indicator. That was 20 years ago. He talked about invading North America and using biological weapons on them. The Chinese have been developing long-range amphibious transports that have exactly the range that would take them to the West Coast from China in one trip. It's very strange. They can only move about a division as far as I see the numbers right now with that. But they also have these attack carriers. They can move an air mobile division that way. That's 2 divisions. It's not a whole lot, but they've got these, when you load 2,000 merchant ships, you have to understand, you remember the Nazi invasion of Norway in 1940? Well, the defector, Colonel Stanislav Lunev, I spoke to him about this future invasion. He knew, he spoke fluent Mandarin. And in 1992, early 92, after the fall of the Soviet Union, Colonel Lunev was at a meeting of the Russian General Staff. And they talked about agreements that they were making with China then to go to war with the US in the future, invade the United States and divide North America. Lunev said they said that they were going to take Alaska and they were going to split Canada with China. China was going to get the lower 48. This is exactly what General Chiao Chen says in his secret speech, that they made a deal with the Russians. They gave the Russians territory in the north to get what they really wanted. And so there's multiple sourcing for this story of a future planned invasion. And what Lunev said is, he said, always in the Soviet military planning and then in the Russian Chinese talk, he said that the model was Hitler's invasion of Norway. So as you recall, what Hitler did is there was no big invasion fleet. There was this giant, because they had to sail the invasion through the British Navy. The British Navy was along the Norwegian coast, and it was laying mines. It was just beginning to lay mines. What the Germans did is they had normal merchant traffic with, and who knows how the ships were flagged. Right now, China is taking Chinese ships, flagging them Panamanian, putting markings on them like they're not Chinese, right? So the Germans come into Norwegian ports in these merchant ships, and instead of merchandise, there's German soldiers in the hulls of the ships. So they go into Trondheim and they go into Bergen and they go into Narvik and they grab these key points, key ports along the Norwegian coast, and the German soldiers pour out. And they had the Brandenburg Regiment, who were people that infiltrated Norway, and they went to a secret warehouse to put on their uniforms and stuff, and they grabbed airfields. When the one task force, naval task force that the Germans did use to force Oslo Fjord got delayed in their invasion up the fjord was problematic. Those Germans that had took the airfield near Oslo, they invaded the city then from the airfield. They brought mountain infantry and paratroops in that way. So, so this was an infiltration invasion. There's no giant beaches in Norway anyway. You know, it wasn't a beach invasion. It wasn't like D-Day or anything. It was an infiltration invasion, which was done when Germany was at peace with Norway. And they had inside help. The defense minister, Quisling, famous name, right? If a synonym for treason, Quisling, the Norwegian defense minister, was a Nazi collaborator that enabled a lot of this.
You know, Peter Schweitzer's book on Biden, that alone raises some very troubling questions about who's in our leadership in connection to China. Jeff, I'm sorry to keep interrupting here because I know you could just talk for hours here about this. This is also surreal on many levels. One of the levels is, why isn't this on MSNBC? Why isn't this on CNN? I've been watching Fox News. I haven't seen you on there talking about this. You would think that Americans would be, I mean, I've discussed you coming on the show with several people in my environment. Nobody knows anything about this. It's not on the news. It's not in the newspapers. What's going on here? I mean, where have you been invited on Fox or anywhere to discuss this?
No. And neither was Mr. Wang or Li Meng Yan, who's been on Fox News. Well, there's a book you may appreciate, and I just had to pull it out. This is Eric Voegelin's Hitler and the Germans, and it's a moral study of being an accessory to murder, right? And he talks about being an accessory to murder and you know what was wrong with the Germans and so on. And you could also say that about the Americans, because look, all these media outlets in the US government, and all these big corporations, Bill Gates, formerly the head of Microsoft, what did they do? They looked at China and said, oh, look at all those customers. 4 times as many people as the United States. We need to make China our partner. See, Hitler's a man we can do business with, right? He should be our chancellor. See, once Vergelin is a political philosopher who said, look, our primary reality is moral. It's like, because our primary reality as human beings, we have to act. We have to do either good, right, or wrong. We have to act rightly, morally. We have that choice. That's our main choice. But if it's kind of tempting and we think, well, the Chinese are, ripping kidneys and hearts and eyeballs out of living people, forced organ donation. If they're genociding the Tibetans or the Uyghurs, it doesn't matter. We can make a lot of money out of these people, right? If it's slave labor from the Gulag, I don't care if they're torturing people or they have to try to put nets outside the windows because they work their labor force so hard, their workers want to commit suicide, right? We can get that cheap labor and we can make a fortune with the Chinese as our partners. And who cares if they want technology from us? Let them have it. What are they going to do with it?
This is very, very troubling, disturbing stuff. I'm not even sure if those words even apply to this. We're going to get a word from our sponsors and we'll be right back. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I recently got one of Mike Lindell's pillows and comforters at mybillow.com. And I started getting some of the most restful sleeps in my life. And you can do the same. Go to mypillow.com and use code GG21 to get incredible and amazing discounts. Or just call 1-800-854-0673. While you're doing that, you'll know that you're supporting Mike Lindell, a true American hero fighting a true American cause. And you'll also be supporting the Glazov Gang. Thank you. May God bless you, and may God bless America. And we are back with Jeff Nyquist, who is very disturbingly opening up our eyes about Chinese war plans, including Taiwan, including the United States. Recent audio was smuggled out of a military meeting. Jeff, let me get to this for a second. I even have this instinct a little bit. There was just some actors. They put this on. It was kind of a simulation. This is just some kind of propaganda. They're trying to trick us. It's not a real meeting. It appears that it is a real meeting. I saw some of your interviews. First of all, you said it was way too boring to be an acting job. But as you've said, people have been executed. Experts have recognized the voices in the meeting, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no hope that this is some kind of a game, right?
There's, of all the people that have listened to it that speak Chinese, only one, and maybe it was wishful thinking on his part, thought, well, maybe it's an exercise or a war game. And we're just misunderstanding. But you see, we have Mr. Wang in his sources. And Mr. Wang not only through his sources got this tape, but he has additional information about other things. That this meeting is not the only one. This is just one they managed to record. That these preparations are ongoing throughout China, not just in Guangdong. And that they have a specific plan in mind. And it's coming from Xi Jinping, the president of China, his intimate circle, the Central Military Commission, and the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China. And the decision was made in April. And what's really fascinating about this, which makes it extra believable, I had a conversation in last October, with a famous Wall Street banker. I'm not going to name him, talking about China. And he was very excited because he said that the Chinese had almost just blown up their economy. That Trump, of course, had damaged their economy. And that there was a meeting in China last October in which Xi Jinping was really angry at the US and he wanted to retaliate on us. for things that were being said here, probably by private people, not by the government. And they were in the process of ratifying his decision, and a group of economists were banging down the door trying to talk to Xi to tell him that if he does this economic retaliation, the Chinese economy would collapse before the end of last year. And he describes this, and he says, at the last minute, Xi came out and talked to them, and they managed to convince him not to do these moves. And he said, but it doesn't matter because the Chinese economy will start to unravel by the end of the second quarter of next year. This is what this investment banker told me. And he said, they're going to have to go to war. He told me this in October. He said that China has massive malinvestment. They have made all kinds of stupid decisions with their economy. And their only way out is war, because they're facing economic collapse. And so they have to blame America. They're having these lockdowns, and they have to, how do they save their economy? If their banks are collapsing, they tell their people, the Americans are doing it. We have to go to war. You have to work hard. We can't pay you, but we can give you food rations.
And Jeff, these crazy videos that we see of the lockdown in Shanghai with all these authorities and military police and astronauts outfit, and they're cracking down because of corona and all these lockdowns. I've seen you explain this and talk about it. This has nothing to do with corona. They are repressing the Chinese population right now. This has nothing to do with corona. They're weeding out the bad from the good, and they're setting the stage of just stifling and crushing any kind of dissent, because when the war starts, they don't want any kind of dissidents gathering for a demonstration or anything. So what we see as cracking down on coronavirus at the minute in crazy ways in Shanghai and other places, this is actually connected to them preparing the stifling of dissent, right?
Yeah, totalitarian control intensifies in war. And it is, the word totalitarian, it means total control. They have to get, they're sitting on 1.4 billion people, and they have to control those people, because if they don't, if those people get away from them, if they rebel, they have a problem. So they have to make sure that there can't be a rebellion in this process. Because look, like with these banks, what was it, 4 banks? And for months, they've been not allowing people to withdraw, and now they're just stealing their money. I mean, there's riots. We don't know how bad it is, but there's riots going on because people's life savings have been taken from them by the government in China. And this is unfortunately the beginning of this tragedy for the Chinese people, because they have such an evil government. But the government's way out is war. Look, Hitler's economy was going bad in 1938. That's when he did the Anschluss on Austria. That's when he pushed into the Sudetenland. He had overspent on defense. He had inflation coming. He was, you read some of the Austrian economists and they say, look, Hitler was against it, up against it economically, and the war was his way out.
Yeah. Jeff, the thing is that I often think so much about is Westerners. They just don't understand these enemies, these totalitarians. They don't think like us. The people who perpetrated and devised and architected the Holocaust, then perpetrated it, they don't think like us. Lenin and Stalin didn't think like us. Mao doesn't think like us. The people who perpetrated the rape of Nanking don't think like us. So Hamas doesn't think like us. So people who are just in disbelief when they're listening to this show, we're not dealing with people who think like us. And so there's a couple things just in this battle plan. I've been researching everything that you're writing, saying on these shows. The battle plan for Taiwan involves taking half of the population of Taiwan eventually when they conquer it and moving it into mainland China. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And tell what is that all about?
Well, remember, these people in Taiwan are used to being free. So how are you going to govern people who are used to be a free associating, doing business? You have to, remember the Lao guy in China is a re-education labor camp system. It's not just labor for the sake of labor. It's re-education labor camp. You go to Harry Wu's writings. Harry Wu wrote the book on the Lao guy. He wrote, Bitter Winds, his own autobiography about his experiences in the Lao guy. It was brainwashing. It was labor, it was torture, it was brainwashing. They weren't just in the camp to work, they gave them propaganda literature to read. And then they psychologically evaluated them and said, okay, you're ready to go back into society. This is mind control. This is breaking a horse, right? Breaking a man down, breaking him down and remaking him as a communist man, as somebody who, when the Communist Party says, you go, right, I agree with the Communist Party. The Communist Party is the only thing that can save us. You maybe saw that video clip from several weeks ago. Actually, it was a couple months ago, where a lady was just terribly upset by the lockdowns in Shanghai, and she was misbehaving in this guy in the white suit, that they were having, that were controlling everybody. He was a policeman, and he was saying, ma'am, you have to control yourself. You got to understand the Communist Party knows what to do. And don't you understand? We are going to war with America. Now, this is in the video. They're speaking in Chinese. We are going to war with America. What will happen if you don't obey? Only the Communist Party can save us. And this is what we're hearing out of China.
Yeah. And Jeff, and we would think, how, are they crazy to invade America, Americans? Now, don't get me wrong. I know, absolutely. There's a lot of hope because so many Americans have a fighting spirit. The Americans that support Donald Trump. And we've got places in the United States where there's a real American tough spirit of manhood and to defend the Constitution. I got all that. But there's a lot of them, like, look, just how brilliant what the Chinese did here. I think they released that virus and then it was an attack on the United States. But how many Americans submitted to this? Oh, here's this syringe we got. There's just this potion in here. Now line up and take it. Boom, boom, boom. Here's a diaper that you got to wear on your face. Now there's a couple dots on the ground. Now stand on those. There's a lot of Americans in this Covidian cult. And that's not a good sign in terms of what other orders that they will follow. And you have talked about, now we've got that battle plan for Taiwan. If I'm not mistaken, on one of your shows that I was watching, you were also discussing the Chinese actually want to use a lot of the land in America for certain reasons. I think farmland, etc., right?
Yeah, they don't. There's a General Chiao Chen was the defense minister of China 20 years ago. He gave a speech before an elite high party group, top Communist Party officials. And it was a secret speech. It got out. Epoch Times translated and published the speech in 2005. I have a version of the speech on my website. And the speech is about, it's about a survey they did of the Chinese people over the internet of whether the Chinese people would accept the killing of civilians, prisoners of war, women and children, blah, 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 whether that would be acceptable to Chinese people. And he announces, well, the survey is a success because 80% of Chinese will go along with that, with our, killing civilians and prisoners of war. And the 20% that don't like it, we can deal with them. And he said, now here's why we did the survey. We did the survey because China's overpopulated. We need Lebensraum. We can't use the word Lebensraum because Hitler used that word and Hitler was evil. So if we use the word, they'll realize we're like Hitler. But we have this problem. There's 1.4 billion Chinese in this territory, and we're polluting the land. We're destroying the water table. We have to teach the Chinese people to go out because once our economy does a downturn, if our economy collapses, the Communist Party will be overthrown and we will be hanged as criminals. So in order to save ourselves and to hold power in China, we must teach the Chinese people to go out. And that means we have to find new land. Now, what are we going to find new land in Taiwan, Japan, India? He says, the translator used the word trivial. And Australia is mostly desert. So where is the land? And anywhere we go to expand, the Americans will support the people that we're trying to take the land from. So we're going to have to fight the Americans anyway. So let it be American land. We have to take American land and we have to make America our #1 target. And he says, at one point in his speech, he says, this is tragic because the Americans have always helped us. They helped us in World War II against the Japanese. They helped us industrialize. They've been partners to us, but it's them or us. Because if we don't teach the Chinese people how to go out, we'll collapse and we'll be hanged as criminals. So that's the whole thing. And he said, so how do we do it? We have to use biological weapons on the United States. We have to kill 100 to 200 million Americans, and then the country will be weakened enough so we can invade it and take the land.
Okay, I'm a little bit speechless here. So let me not even bother because I think the audience knows the severity of all of this. The Russian invasion of Ukraine, Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Oh, it's just Putin. He's crazy. This was just some kind of reckless thing, resurrect the Soviet Empire or whatever. I've been watching what you're talking about. You have revealed that China has termed the Russian invasion of Ukraine by the letter Z, the end of the alphabet, that this is actually part of some kind of larger plan. And that this was done on some levels as a distraction, but also to put a lot of American attention and war footing towards Ukraine so that China can do something from another side. China and Russia are working together, and what's happening in Ukraine, Jeff, is actually arguably part of everything that you're talking about right now, right?
Yeah, in the 56-minute meeting, the Chinese refer to the war as the final war. And that's a very interesting description. And in, a communism is not an ideology, it's a science, it's a theory of revolution or a theory of taking power in the world and reaching the final state of history. And of course, in a sense, it's very similar to those people who believe that Christ is going to come back and set up his kingdom on earth, and then history ends and it's just a millennial reign, and the lion will lie down with the lamb. There'll be no more wars. This is the kind of sense of the communist, because it's the end of history. Communism is the final state of man. It's the final paradise on earth. And so the war that brings communism to power worldwide would be the final war. Because there wouldn't, once communism, the reason for war, according to the communists, is capitalism. Once capitalism is wiped out, there won't be any reason for war because, there won't be any, private property to fight over. So there's an ideological sense in which it's a final war. And there's also the sense that China, being such a huge power, and Russia, her ally, and Cuba and Venezuela and Nicaragua and all the other communist countries, actually, believe it or not, that still exist, the communist bloc, they go into this war to destroy basically one country, the only country they really need to destroy, that's the US. If they can use this depriving food, depriving fertilizer, depriving oil to force Germany, force Japan, force our allies to abandon us because the economic pain is too great and isolate us, they can go straight for us. And once they get rid of us, our nuclear deterrent protects all the free countries, the whole free world. You get rid of that deterrent, there is no free world.
Fantastic. Jeff, I wish we had 2 more hours. We just got a couple minutes here. For those of us that are in Los Angeles, you would think, okay, well, let's go to the East Coast. Well, now New York City has issued a public safety announcement about surviving a nuclear war. Jeff, what the hell is all that about?
Well, I think that some people are waking up to the fact that nuclear weapons are pointed at us and there are serious threats. Look, Russia has threatened nuclear war. The Russians, two Russian officials last week, about a week ago, said that they're going to take Alaska back. And there's billboards in Siberia saying Alaska's ours that the Russians have up there now. That was on Breitbart here this past week. And I was told, Colonel Lunev said they're going to take Alaska back, and they're saying it openly. They're going to take it back. And one of the justifications, I think it was the Russian defense official, said that they're taking it back because of us supporting Ukraine has cost them, and so they're taking Alaska. They're going to take Alaska as compensation for what we did to them in Ukraine.
Yeah, well, Joe Biden is obviously a puppet that has dementia. There's other descriptions we could use. Our prayer, of course, would be that his handlers would be people like, Donald Trump or, people that love this country. But unfortunately, it's more like Obama, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, maybe even Joy Behar. Just the whole thing is very tragic. Jeff, we've got to go. Am I correct that everybody should go to jrnyquist.blog?
Yes, jrnyquist.blog.
jrnyquist.blog. Everybody go to it. Jeff, in 60 seconds, what should people be walking away from this show thinking?
Well, communists, they bungle all the time, but we're headed into a rough time and we need to pull together and we need to identify our enemy, both foreign and domestic, and we need to, defend the country.
Jeff Nyquist, you are a gentleman and a scholar. Thank you for being such a courageous and noble truth teller in our perilous world today and in the face of all these monstrous enemies that we're facing. Thank you, and keep up the great work in sounding the alarm.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Jeff, so much. Ladies and gentlemen, jrnyquist.blog. Follow him. Go to that blog. We'll see you soon on the Glazov Gang. Good night.